Hello everyone, welcome back to part 4 of the HUSO educational video series on organic chemistry. In this video we will be talking about sterics and alkanes. So what is sterics? So sterics, or also known as steric hindrance, is basically how bulky a molecule is. So here in this diagram you can see that this molecule is quite bulky since it has many groups that are clustered close together. And sterics are important in organic chemistry because they kind of just explain almost half or even more of the phenomena that occur in organic chemistry. So a running joke in organic chemistry is that if you come across a question you don't understand, you just write sterics down and it's more than likely that you'll get some partial credit. But that just shows how powerful sterics is in the realm of organic chemistry. And in order to understand sterics, we will also need to learn a little bit about alkanes in this video. Alkanes are some of the simplest types of organic molecules that do not consist of any double bonds and only single CH bonds. And the properties of alkanes are greatly affected by sterics, as are the properties of almost all organic molecules. So let's discuss a little bit about why we care about sterics. Why is sterics so important? So one area of application that you might think about is in biology and biochemistry, where you are studying the structure of these large complex proteins. You can imagine that these proteins all have their unique structure, mainly because of interactions between side chains, which you might have learned in biology class, such as the primary, secondary structure of proteins. And that would be the electronics portion of the central dogma of organic chemistry, but you can imagine that sterics also plays a role. So a case study is actually collagen and brittle bone disease, also known as osteogenesis imperfecta, which you might have heard of. So a protein, collagen, that makes up a large portion of your bones consists of 3 strands of peptides that are intertwined together. And these strands are able to intertwine partially because in the wild type or normal version of these molecules, one of the amino acids present is glycine. So this amino acid right here is glycine. However, brittle bone disease occurs when this amino acid is mutated to become tryptophan, which is this molecule right here. So this is tryptophan. And immediately you can already spot some differences between these molecules. Tryptophan has this huge side group right here. And so that is a steric factor that causes these collagen molecules then to be unable to bind together in this 3-chain helix, partially because the extra bulkiness from this group would potentially push these molecules away from each other and allow them or prevent them from forming a 3-chain helix. So this is quite an interesting application of how sterics plays a role in biology and disease. So now let's get into actually understanding the energetics of these steric interactions. And so in order to do that, we had to do some review on, or some learning on alkane nomenclature, because we haven't formally covered alkane nomenclature in this video. So alkane nomenclature can be a very tedious thing to learn. And so I'd recommend that you actually do some research on your own to get familiar with alkane nomenclature. Perhaps if you've taken a general chemistry class, you might know a little bit about alkane nomenclature. So in this video, I'll just go over some brief tips and overviews on how to name alkanes. So alkanes typically consist of a parent chain or a main chain and some side chains. The main chains are shown in this table right here, and depending on the length of the chain, you give the molecule a different name. These right here are these substituents. And different substituents get different names. So when you're learning alkane nomenclature, you often have to do quite a bit of memorization. But in the end of the day, just remember that nomenclature isn't the most important part of organic chemistry. The most important part is the reactions and the concepts. So don't stress too much over nomenclature. But here we will just get into a little bit of practice with nomenclature. So here's an example molecule, an example alkane that only consists of carbon and hydrogen single bonds. And we can see that the first step when we want to name an alkane is to find the longest parent chain. In this case, this is this 11 carbon chain right here. And this chain is given the name decane. So this wasn't on the previous slide, but a chain with 11 carbons is named decane. Next step we want to do is name all the substituents. So this substituent is a methyl substituent. This is also a methyl substituent, which I'll abbreviate with Me. This is an ethyl substituent, which I'll abbreviate with Et. And this substituent right here, if we look on the previous slide, is a tert-butyl substituent. So I'll abbreviate that with TBU. And lastly, when we want to provide the entire name for this molecule, we always put the parent name at the end of the name, and we put the substituents in alphabetical order, grouping similar substituents together by prefixes. So what I mean by that is, I guess the best way to do is to do an example. So when we name this, we will first always identify the carbon on the parent chain that the substituent is connected to. So this T-butyl right here is connected to the 6th carbon. So we will name this 6-tert-butyl. And then we want to maybe name ethyl next. So we will do 7-ethyl. And then when we name the two methyls, we actually want to group them together. So we say 3,5-dimethyl. And then lastly, we can just put the name of the parent side chain, which is just decane. Now you might be wondering, why did I write the substituents in this specific order? And the reason is we need to put them in alphabetical order. That's just how the rules for naming these molecules work. So you will notice that tert-butyl came before ethyl and methyl. And that is because prefixes don't matter. So the tert prefix, or the tert abbreviation, doesn't actually play a role. It is this B that determines the alphabetical ordering. Then comes E. And similarly, this di prefix doesn't have an effect on the alphabetization ordering. So therefore it goes B, E, and M in alphabetical order. One confusing thing I will note is that iso is actually not considered a prefix. So when you see something like isobutyl or isopropyl, those actually determine alphabetical order. So as you can see, nomenclature can get a little bit confusing at times. So don't worry too much about it. It is good that you can perhaps look at a molecule and identify its parent chain and substituents, but what's more important is being able to actually understand the concepts and the properties of alkanes. All right, so lastly, let's just do some practice. Here are 4 alkanes. You can pause the video here and take maybe 10 to 15 minutes to name these. Feel free to, Google up the side chain names and the parent chain names, just to have a reference if you're doing this for the first time. And yeah, so go ahead and give it a try. All right, so hopefully you had a try at naming these organic molecules. Here are the answers. So you can go ahead and verify. And just as a quick note, this group right here corresponds to this group. You might have written isopropyl, and that's totally fine. Here, we write 4,1-methyl-ethyl, just because this 4, so let me try using a different color. This 4 corresponds to this 4th carbon that this big group is connected to. And then this 1 corresponds to the fact that perhaps this group is connected to the 1st carbon going off from the parent chain. So this would be a way of naming this molecule if you didn't know that this side chain was called isopropyl. But in practice, isopropyl is a more appropriate name to give here. So you could instead here have written isopropyl. All right, and that's it for this week's video, or for this video actually, in case you're not watching by week. Stay tuned for the next video where I will talk more about the energetics of bulkiness and sterics now that we know a little bit about alkanes.